Misha here, and finally doing this video. Just had a lot of life happening. Nothing bad, but this is gonna sound strange, but I read books, I watch television, movies for entertainment, escapism, pleasure, but also to be thought-provoking. I don't approach everything as a critic. And by that I mean like professional. I think these days, with the way things are, everything gets analyzed to the point of death. And this is both sides of the fence. I can't say that's wrong. I think we all do it. But it seems more immediate now. I don't remember thinking terribly deeply about original Star Trek, either the TOS or TNG or whatever, at the time necessarily. It was upon rewatch and times with friends and retrospectives. Because of course, when I watched all that, the internet either didn't exist or was very nascent, not like today where it's a whole thing. And I believe that does inform a whole lot. And I've had a whole lot of thoughts this week about just things in general and the internet, and the thing is, these thoughts are not new. It's nigh on impossible to have an original thought these days. But with that said, what do I think after watching the entire season of Starfleet Academy? The final episode specifically, I don't think they could have done it much better. With the caveat of the setup from before, where they could have gone with it. And overall, probably because I didn't even intend to watch the series, especially, I explained why earlier, I ended up doing it. I came in with no expectations. It was fine. It was actually enjoyable. I would say the best compliment I could give is, the biggest complaint I have is, there's only 10 episodes a season, and I realized if wanting more is the biggest complaint, that says something. I also was thinking, maybe not returning to 26 or even 24, 22 episodes a year, which were the norm when I was younger. Doing 13, 15, kind of like Doctor Who used to do, more of a British style. That'd be all right. I don't know what it is between 10 and 13. 10 feels like a big mini-series. 13 actually feels like a legitimate season of television. I don't know. It's funny how just a couple extra episodes can make that difference. And, one thing that gets tossed around a lot is it's not made for you when it comes to modern media. I can say pretty much objectively, nothing's made for me. How many TV shows are made for people that are blind? That said, just because it's not made for me doesn't mean I can't get enjoyment out of it. So my perspective is always going to be different. And that actually lends why I liked the finale just fine. There was a lot of talking. There wasn't a lot of action. And that's where a lot of other recent Star Trek finales have not lost me. I can go, that's fine, but it doesn't do a lot for me. Whenever there's a lot of explosions and noises going on, I'm pretty much just sitting there waiting for dialogue or for it to slow down, because it's pretty freaking boring to me. So when there's more talking, there we go. Anyway, I'm in front of the camera for now. I'll probably record this throughout the evening. I finally had time this Sunday. I just kept, every time I thought about doing this earlier, I was just either something popped up more important, actual work stuff, or I had guests out here, or I was just dog tired, Had a lot going on this week, as I already mentioned. But instead of an initial reaction, you get kind of more my thoughtful reaction for those who care. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just a personal opinion. But yeah, I didn't hate it. And some of the criticisms I had actually maybe I've let up on, although I've got one or two new criticisms. it is what it is. At the end of the day, what harm does it do to try watching something? Now, don't say, oh, it wasted times of my life. I've seen you on Facebook. I've seen you watching porn. Don't you tell me you haven't wasted an hour of your life at least once a week, because we all have. So with that said, not overvaluing our own time, we'll just dive in. It's a nice evening. Kind of got warm today. First kind of warm day out here, but the evenings tend to cool off as the sun goes down over the mountains. The creeks next to me are up flowing. So I thought, we'll sit outside and just chit-chat about it. But right this minute, I just cooked myself a bite to eat. I'm going to do that, letting it get cool right now. And kind of, like I said, pop back in from time to time and get in front of the camera and tell you what I think. Before we dive in, let's take a minute. Listen. Hear the river going, the water going. A few birds out, not many. Few insects chirping. This is my world. Relax. Kind of take stock of the world. At least that's my perspective, why I like being out here. When you do that, I think it just kind of leaves you a little more open to things, a little more happy-go-lucky, I don't know. Too many times people are stuck indoors, or even if they're outdoors, they're on their phones, and you get caught up in the black and white mentality of Facebook or Twitter or whatever else. I've never have had a social media. Never really saw a need for it, frankly. Although I really enjoy in-person friends, family. So much more nuance can be gotten there. We often extrapolate intent and either interpret something with a very rose-colored filter or with a very negative filter automatically, instead of really digging in and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of other people, not just jumping to this conclusion or that. Yeah. Isn't it nice? It's a little busy on the road right now because of spring break and heavy traffic and being warm weather, but can't begrudge people. The trees, of course, haven't come in leaves into stuff yet, but it's coming very soon. I watched most of Starfleet Academy out here. I think there might have been a couple episodes I watched back in town, but I watched the first several out here and the last one or two out here. So, already a good mindset. My point is, if you go into something expecting to hate it, you will. And if you go into something with an open mind, on the other hand, you don't want to go in making excuses and only looking at the positives. That's just as obnoxious, in my opinion. But I would say, this kind of stuff, it ain't that fucking serious. Relax. Well, even though we're in the daylight savings time, it does get dark quick out here in the mountains. It always has, but especially early spring. And there's actually a wind that's kicked up and a Nice cool breezes coming through. It almost feels like there's going to be rain. Even though the weathermen haven't predicted it, that doesn't mean anything. They haven't been anything right at all this past week. All right, let's talk about Star Trek. If this is like I'm kind of putting off talking about this, you're not wrong, but it's not because, yeah, I just feel like kind of what's the point? People are so dug in. And what's surprising to me, and I'm going to use this just as a shorthand, but there's kind of a right-wing group that has never liked it or even really any new of Star Trek. Some of them will break ranks a little bit and say they like Picard Season 3 and maybe Strange New World Season 1, but generally no. Now the left side has been a little more, but it's kind of amazed me that there are some people on the left that seem unhappy with it. Is it weird that makes me just kind of like it more? No. I think what it is, yes, the Federation, Starfleet, is an analogy, at least perceptually so, for the USA. Although I would argue it's not the USA as it is. It's an idealized version. And I've seen there's some backlash on that side about how in the end, the Federation was essentially the good guys, whereas the first episode, it looked like the Federation was the bad guys. And this really frustrates me. One, it's fiction. Why do you want it to be like real life? What's wrong with being idealistic? What's wrong with being imaginary for the future? For another, why do you want the U.S. to be the bad guys? Look, the U.S. has lots of problems. If you're on this channel, you know I haven't agreed with a lot of the politics stuff. But you know what? That's democracy for you. The problem is, as much as you think the U.S. has issues with race or gender equality or, homosexual or trans rights, as much as you think that's not great here, I invite you to travel. Because a lot of other places in the world, and this is no excuse to do worse, but I'm just saying there's this weird notion of America bad, rest of the world good. That's not true. America just is. Well, the wind's kicking up. But anyway, I've noticed that because the Federation's back to being the good guys, more or less, even if they had to make hard decisions. Oh. Piece of wood just fell. But I like that. I mean, I don't want... I don't mind a Federation, a Starfleet that stumbles, like we saw in Deep Space Nine. You know, the bad admiral trope has been around since TOS. But I don't want them to be rotten to the core bad guys. And conversely, I don't want the perceived bad guys to be, having good points. I mean, that's getting awfully close to, Hitler had some good ideas, that kind of thought. No, this is fiction. It's like, Khan Noonien Singh. Khan was the bad guy. He was sympathetic. You understood. He lost his wife and all that. It still didn't make him a good guy, but it's nice to have depth there. And I think that's what we ended up with, was bad guys that were bad. And the Federation, while flawed, is generally good. And again, it's about the ideals. And I was down for that. And it does frustrate me that so many people now just USA bad regardless, just because an election didn't go the way they wanted. Look, the election didn't particularly, well, I can't even say the way I wanted it. In my opinion, the Democrats just completely screwed that up. And I mean, it was their election to lose and they lost it. So instead of getting mad at everyone else, look at your own side, quite frankly. But, on the flip side of that, you could say that it got a little too close to being like Trump. But what comes to mind is back when the prequels came out, I heard everyone saying, oh, this was an analogy for George W. Bush and all this Iraq war, Palpatine and all that. No, it's just, the times you're in. Bad guys be bad guys. You can connect them to whoever you want. I'm sure some on the right, if they watched it, found ways to connect it to Biden or Harris or whatever. But I did find the fundamental message about hate is actually a very good, very poignant, and very useful one. Short term, hate's natural. It's even effective. Short term. But it is true, as it was said in the episode, hate will never set you free. If anything, hate is more of a shackle. And the longer you hold on to it internally, it's a very toxic, a very corrosive substance. So again, if you have it for a short time, no harm, no foul. But if you keep that in you for days, weeks, months, years, it eats away at you. And again, this is something I think the left might keep in mind. Their hatred of Trump might end up turning them into something like Trump. And of course, conversely, being told to hate someone, that all your problems are because of them, this is not a new message. If whatnot, I find it very good because you've got to let go of that. You need to turn it into something constructive, turn hate into justice, turn hate into understanding, do something with it, deal with it, because eventually you will destroy yourself with it. It's a horrid emotion, and things are never built with hate. You're not going to build society. You're not going to build a coalition. You're not going to raise a family on hate. And that's what's really wrong with so much politics today on both sides, truly, because there are people that absolutely hate Trump. Likewise, there's a lot of messaging on the right that isn't exactly love and acceptance. And I think that's why we see ourselves in this position where not much is getting done, because you can only go so far with hate, and that's the limit. But that said, that's the real world. I don't want that in Star Trek. So the messaging there is fine. The fact that they went to a trial scene, that was fine because of all of that. I definitely like that the answer wasn't big explosion, fighting, combat. Yeah. But the series overall, it ended fine for what it was. So I will say that, episode 10 did about as well as it could have, because it didn't make the mistakes that I was afraid it would. I was afraid it would be his mother would be part of the bad guys or whatever, and there'd be some kind of weird, overly emotional melodrama thing. Nope, they got over it. Fine, and it also kind of frustrates me that many on the left seem to gloss over the fact of, she was separated from her son. That's so horrible. Look, Federation bad. She killed a person. She was an accessory to murder. It doesn't matter the what, when, where, how. That has to be punished. Of course it does. Quit making she was starving. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not. You can give some allowances for someone steals a loaf of bread because they're hungry. You can't say, they stole a loaf of bread and in the committal of it, they killed the baker. No, that's beyond the pale. Your hunger does not trump that person's life. So yeah, I guess that's what's kind of funny. Up until this point, I've seen mostly people on the right criticizing the show. But it's kind of fascinated me that now a lot of the left didn't like the ending. And again, I'm just, some people I've seen on there. Some people liked it, some people didn't. That's fine. But, yeah, it's funny to me. Because things are nuanced like that. But what about this series as a whole? In a particular order, I'm not a fan of that kind of sense of humor. There were some funny scenes, but that Marvel universe sense of humor is pervasive throughout all of Hollywood, and I really hope it goes away. I've said before, I'm especially not a fan of those films. Again, I don't hate them. If you like them, cool. They're just not for me. Again, it's just not my taste. But because they were so successful, they went everywhere, and that general fourth wall breaking, very flippant attitude. I don't know. No, I did like the original '89 Batman. Of course, I was like 10 years old when that came out, so that was cool. It had some humor, but took itself pretty serious. I remember the original, couple of Superman's movies, and of course Superman 3. The cyborg scene scarred all of us. You know which one I'm talking about. Oh, and then of course Batman and Robin scarred us all in different ways. But so those are the superhero movies I remember. I guess the last ones I remember seeing in the theaters were, like Batman Begins in that era, which was good. But yeah, the modern things, yeah, that just seems to work through, and everyone seems to be suffering from that because everyone copies everyone. Now, one thing I will say is the language, the dialect, the words used. It's obvious that Paramount, CBS, whoever is trying to get a younger audience. I don't know how successful they're going to be at that. Maybe. You never know. We're in a very different time. It definitely doesn't seem like, by and large, they were able to capture a younger audience with more recent Star Wars. At least not the films. But anyway, what's funny about the lingo used is it doesn't really come across as Gen Z or Gen Alpha talking. It comes across as what a millennial thinks Gen Z or Gen Alpha would talk like. But I've seen a lot of shows do that. And it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. Will it date it? Yes. But let's be honest. I know because we all grew up with it, we don't recognize it. That's like everyone thinks everyone else has an accent except themselves. The original series had a way of speaking that wasn't really natural. It was very theatrical, very Shakespearean, and it's very different. It's not just the words, but the acting in the original series. I think about Decker with the Doomsday Machine. That like the way he's just playing it up in the sick bay is it's very classic, but it's very much that style of 60s acting. And if you look at the original series, you'll see that. Likewise, TNG is very 80s conservative, even though it's a pretty progressive show all in all. There's a certain 80s conservatism in that thankfully Deep Space Nine breaks the mold a little bit. Certainly Cisco gives a lot more range than Picard ever did. And then there's Voyager that I don't know. It's Voyager. It was a thing. I mean, Tom Paris said things and did things that were different. Whatever. Him and Chakotay were just those blank slates that they threw anything they needed to on. But a lot of that stuff ages. I mean, it's one of those things I can recognize, but it doesn't run my way of perceiving. But nah, it is pretty goofy a lot of the time. But only time will tell how a younger generation or really anyone else will respond to it, quite frankly. But language aside, the acting seemed solid, and it definitely had more of a feel of an ensemble cast than Discovery. And I believe the character interactions for the most part. There was a few scenes that seemed forced one way or the other, but all in all, the chemistry was pretty good for certainly a first season. The actors seemed to be cast properly. No one felt terribly wooden. I'm just thinking back to the first season of TNG. I guess TOS is kind of interesting in that its first season was arguably its best, but all the other shows, DS9 I really like. Its first season had some good things, but I don't think anyone argued that DS9 season 1 was its best. I've said before, hot take, I really liked Enterprise. I was always a big Scott Bakula fan, and even season 1 was okay. It just kind of fell into the trope thing, and just somewhat Academy did, but it also subverted tropes. It wasn't as tropey as Strange New World season 3. Maybe that's why I'm giving Academy more grace, is because I was really disappointed by Strange New World season 3. It was just, when it had a decent episode, it was just so much Color by Numbers just wrote Star Trek. Terrarium is one. Look, Enemy Mine's fine, but that was so by the numbers. And people praised it. But the flip side is you had things like 4.5 Vulcans in the holodeck episode, which were just, yeah, not good. I kept waiting for the episodes to get better, and they just didn't. And there's only 10 episodes, and it just felt weird. And that was a third season. You'd think by then they would kind of have it down. But too jokey. And while Academy had jokes, at least they dialed it back some compared to that. So that was good. And I said this in my previous video, but I find it kind of funny, those people that liked Lower Decks, which is fine, I liked it too, but don't like this. I'm sorry, the humor's the same. It really is the same type of humor. It's a little more frantic and fast-paced. And, of course, you have cartoons, so you can have more visual jokes. But overall, yeah, it's the same. Trust me. So if you like one, the humor in the other, it would seem to cross over. And if you don't, and it took me a while to warm up to that type of humor. I'm not a big Rick and Morty fan. Again, personal taste. Whatever. A cartoon that I do like, Archer. I freaking loved Archer. So, just trying to tell you, more my speed. I mean, come on, he carries a Walther and he likes cats, so it suits me very well. Anyway, what was I saying? Kind of going back over the season episodes after the conclusion, I thought, I still say episode 3 was my least favorite. It just didn't hit me right, but that's just me. Likewise, episode 5, the one about Deep Space Nine, I really wanted to like, and I'm not saying it was actively bad, but it had like a failure to launch, and I just didn't buy the emissary connection, just like the word connection. I think if they'd even just dropped that word a few times in the previous episode, it just felt literally forced in the middle, and that's painful because I think the internet at large, myself included, has collectively agreed that Deep Space Nine is like the pinnacle, the peak of Star Trek, right? I mean, and Avery Brooks, and to get us that close to a tease and not have at least a voice cameo from him live. Yes, I know they did a poetry read at the end, which was better than nothing, but it wasn't made for it. It just didn't quite hit for me. Not going to say it was actively horrible, but yeah, those two were kind of, left me a little unsatisfied. Episodes 2 and, what would it be? I guess 7 and 9 were just middling for me. They had moments, especially 2. I generally liked it okay. Maybe it was a little bit of the disability representation in it. That was cool. From what I understand, the actor really is deaf, so nice to know we can get work somewhere. 7 had moments, but it just kind of felt either out of place or, I don't know. It just didn't quite click either. And then 9 was just the setup episode. For what it was fine, but it felt a little drug out for what it was, and a little bit of plot convenience, but wasn't the worst thing ever. And I really could say the same thing for episode 1. It was perfectly fine as a launch episode. Nothing horrible, nothing amazing about it, but it worked okay. Episodes 4, 6, 8, and 10. Boy, I didn't plan it like that. Most of the even numbers, for different reasons, I actively enjoyed and thought were good Star Trek. I thought they felt like something new, but not just alien. I mean, it was a horrible thing. I think one thing we can all agree on is Section 31 was bottom of the barrel. But even if it had been good, it would never have felt like Star Trek. it wasn't even Star Wars, which it's one thing to kind of mix those up. They've done it for years, but then you get into that. That was the Avengers or any of that. It was a superhero movie. It just happened to suck. But apart from that, even if it had been good, I don't think I would have liked it. But I think episodes 4, 6, 8, and 10 felt very much like Star Trek, but not a repeat. Not like Terrarium again from Strange New Worlds season 3. And even a lot of Strange New Worlds has seemed very tropey, especially the last 2 seasons. The first season had some, but I really liked most of the episodes in the first season of it. Discovery, that's a whole other thing. I will say I am happy they've kept Discovery, except for just a couple of mentions, out of the Starfleet Academy, which is nice. People liked it, they hated it, they in between, whatever. Either way, let's move on from that. As I talked about in the first video on this episode 4, I like the Klingon Jaden. It's just fun. He reminds me of the guy from the Green Mile. Big but somehow lovable and good and vulnerable and whatnot. And I thought it was a good showing for him. I liked how he just didn't toe the Starfleet line and challenge Starfleet. And I really loved the Klingon solution at the end. That's exactly the kind of pageantry and in theater that the Klingons would do. Because when they write the history books, they'll say that. Yeah, it fit so well. It was a little predictable, but in the, okay, yeah, they're doing this kind of way. And it didn't feel forced. If anything, it reminded me of the end of Emissary in season 2 of TNG. I think it was the Emissary, the one with Kalar, where her and Worf temporarily take command of the Enterprise to greet the Klingon Katinga that came out of cryosleep and was going to go raiding. And, here we are. Klingons are in command of a Federation ship. It was very much like that, but on a bigger scale. And I really believe that Kronos was destroyed by the dilithium going up, because it felt like a continuation of what we saw in Star Trek 6 with Praxis exploding. We know how much damage that did to them, and we know that their planet was already unstable, very craggy, very earthquakey. So, yeah, I could see that as really being devastating to them. And we don't know what happened to them over the past centuries. I mean, it's a warlike race, even if they were on good terms with the Federation, the Romulans even. War is part of their culture, so I'm sure they had ups and downs, and they were always subject to picking a fight with someone a little bigger than them and being on the edge of it. No, I thought it was really good. It was nice to see real Klingons again, and they felt like Klingons, but it also felt more evolved. Like they felt like time had gone by. I kind of wish it wasn't 1,000 years in the future or 900 from Next Generation, but I also understand that when you look at what Star Trek's come before with various time travelers from the 25th and 26th century, Enterprise did the 29th century, it kind of pushes you to the 31st century if you want to be free and clear to tell your own story. So it's just one of those practicality things. And I've said this too before, seeing the Klingons be, nomadic and having had a diaspora, it does give the Federation, Starfleet, an excuse to kind of revert technology, because that's what happens. That's technology is not always an upward rising curve. It goes up and down and sideways. And, I would say the technology feels a little bit backwards at times. I mean, who knows? It's fiction. It doesn't really bother me. They've at least done a few things like programmable matter that feel futuristic. And, episode 4 I thought was really good, and it was all about Klingons, and it was about Jaden, and he's a charming fellow. Him apparently being gay it's a thing, whatever. I prefer Russian women. That's why my wife is Russian. That's my preference. His preference is for other nice dudes, so whatever. We all have our preferences. Doesn't matter to any of us anything, and I think in this year and day and time, It's commonly accepted that people have a right to who they want to love, and be it at that. Too many of my good friends are gay, and yeah, it is what it is. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you a good person automatically. It absolutely doesn't make you a bad person. So I don't think many people are actually having a problem with that, despite what some online try to stir up. But if anyone actually doesn't like it just because he's gay, yeah, fuck you. Episode 6 is really good. Team building and all that. Of course, Noose Baraka comes back. Nice midway point. You know, in the first episode, he's kind of jokey. And I've seen some criticisms that, like in episode 10, he's more theatrical and bombastic, whereas in 6, he's more low key. Well, of course, because in 6, it's just him one on one with the captain, maybe the admiral too. But you know, he's in private. In episode 10, he's playing to the galaxy. You know, he's being broadcast live, and he's got an audience. I've known a lot of people like that. When you get them one on one, they're one way. When they've got an audience, they're another. I believe it. And I thought it was really good in the end that he got the best of him. I kept waiting for the rug to be pulled out. And even though it looked like he was going to win, that they had outsmarted him and that they knew better. And it's like, oh, he stole something, but it wasn't this. No. He straight up won. It was refreshing to see the bad guy actually just win. And it came at a cost. People died for real. And it generally speaking worked. And I think it worked the way they did it, of having the first half of the season pretty lighthearted. I'm not saying there weren't some serious things, but pretty lighthearted were every day. Because if you look up to this point, it's like day-to-day life, whatever. Then a bad thing happens. And I like how they don't just ignore it. Although I do feel like episode 7 and 8 should have been flipped or reworked a little bit. I do agree with some of the criticism that it felt a little weird having 7 and then 8, almost as if they had to flip them around, maybe for production reasons, special effects reasons. I don't know. Maybe scheduling. I'm not sure what. But, you know, that's not the first time that's happened. It actually happened in TNG Season 1. You had the 01001100 episode coming after the big goodbye, and that was very obvious that it was meant to come before, because they refer to in the big goodbye the upgrades to the holodecks, which happened in 010011824865. By the way, one of my favorite jokes of all time was Futurama, when Bender's talking about a dream and he was saying 010, and I thought I saw a 2. That just, Futurama was so awesome. Anyway, what was I saying? I recognize that episode 8 does have problems. For one, not enough time spent with the Doctor. By the way, I think Cask is one of the coolest names for a planet, and I could not tell you why. I just think that's a cool name. Oh, well. I think them using real life is the point of his trauma would work if they had just said, and that was just the first person I lost. And then he could have talked about everyone else, or even just intimated it. But to just say that was that, I don't know. But that's been out there. The point is, though, the emotion was real. The actors sold it. You could tell it was earned. He'd been building up all season. Because we knew the Doctor. We knew it wasn't normal or right. So aside from criticizing the exact cause a smidgen, I love the intro monologue or log he did. We're going to say doctor's log, whatever. I also think it's funny that even after 900 years, he still doesn't have a name. So they didn't go with Joe, apparently. And then even the Our Town thing, the dealing with trauma and everything. The reason I think the episode is so good is because it made me feel things. Now, part of it is I've experienced loss, and I've experienced what sometimes feels like a lot of time passing by. And, yeah, it hit me on a level, And if something's going to get an emotional response, a legitimate one, I can't say it's a bad episode. Even if I didn't like some of the nuts and bolts, the end product worked. It delivered it. And again, I like the fact that it doesn't just act like these young people who probably never experienced loss or death before just got over it. No. They didn't. And that worked. I thought it was a really, really solid episode. And on an emotional level, yeah, one of my favorites of the season, but probably not number one. It's because it has issues. I would honestly say, yeah, 4, 6, and 10, especially. I'm hard pressed to have criticisms for at least anything that matters. In fact, the only problems I have with episode 10 are just ones that inherited from episode 9. I'm one of the people that thinks, did we really need a galaxy ending event again? Because they've been what I liked about it is they did subvert it very quickly. It wasn't put on the forefront as much as I had feared. Oh well, it almost just seems like now they have to do that every time, and I really wish they wouldn't. It's okay to have big stakes, but they don't have to be everything. Yeah, well, but they didn't go down that route. They didn't make his mother a secret villain or some big controversy where he had to choose. There was a have cake and eat it too, which normally would come across as contrite, but in a modern series it's been really going for the melodrama. It was actually nice to see them not going that way. I thought the whole thing with the doctor worked fine. I've seen 2 interpretations of how he knew how to stabilize Omega. One, he was on Voyager when it happened and he had experience. But I always like the idea that he's a computer. They sent him the data in the computer. He analyzed it. He knew whatever. It works. You know, the thing is that they had handheld people and explicitly explained how he knew the answer. Then people would say, what do you think, we're stupid? So modern shows can't win. If they tell you everything step by step, that gets criticized. And if they leave it open to interpretation or for people's logic, then it gets criticized too. So I have to say, original Star Trek wasn't immune to this either. It's just over the decades we've smoothed over those rough edges. We've had beta canon, we've had our head canon to justify things, and we like it, so we're going to permit a lot of little problems that every show has, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the standards we hold any modern show to are so incredibly high, frankly. And why? Well, one reason, how huge the budgets and the money behind shows are these days. It is ridiculous. It truly is. Hollywood, to me, has just... I think they've overall lost the plot. Everything has to be a big blockbuster because they put too much money into it. And it can't just be made for America or the Western audience. It has to get a global audience now. Anyway, that's a whole different deal. So what do I think in total? Honestly, I like Academy better than Discovery. I was really kind of frustrated with season 4 of Discovery. It felt too drawn out, and I really didn't like the second half of season 5. It just kind of seemed artificial in as far as the conflict. But yeah, I generally liked it. Academy better, that is. Compared to Picard, that's hard because of nostalgia. It's hard. I think we could mostly agree that season 3 of Picard was better, but there was a certain element of fun that Academy had that Picard season 3 didn't have. Picard season 3, the way it was written, it could be a little stressful. It really could. And not in a bad way. It's okay, but it was a more serious thing a lot of times, and I wasn't big fan of how they ended it by renaming the Titan to the Enterprise. That was, yeah, but that's nitpicky. But I'd be lying, I'd say, if I didn't care. It was awesome that at least they didn't make the Star Wars mistake. You know, they missed their opportunity to have all the main leads, all three leads, and Lando, you can say too, put in there for Star Wars while everyone was alive. They at least took that opportunity with Star Trek. All the crew was alive. They all made it out. If nothing else, it was great having them back together for one more ride if we were going to do it. Sure. No problems there. And I think Worf actually did a whole lot to redeem Raffi as a character, but it's neither here nor there. I really liked most of Season 1 of Strange New Worlds. 3, I've already talked about. 2 was kind of in the middle. I like 2 okay, but not as much as 1. I would kind of probably rank Academy about with Strange New Worlds Season 1. So below Picard Season 3. I don't know. It's fine. I'm not going to say all new Trek is shit, because this is where we're at. And I don't think it is. I've derived enough enjoyment out of it overall. Are there decisions that I wouldn't have made? Sure. Have I said before that I really like Star Trek Continues? Yeah. But I've also seen a lot of really bad fan-made content as well, meaning that we all have our own kind of thing, and that's all right. I mean, I don't want the franchise to end, and it was kind of set up in a way that it doesn't really need to. I wasn't really keen when they announced Enterprise as being a prequel in 2001. I wasn't really keen on it, but I gave it a fair shot, and it was okay. And I'm definitely more than old enough to remember when people completely poo-pooed that, or even Voyager. There was a time when some diehard people really hated Voyager. I'm not saying that some of the new stuff will age as well as those, because definitely now there's a lot of people that like Enterprise, myself included, or Voyager. But you don't know what the future is going to hold, what people are going to like and not like. I mean, look at the Star Wars prequels. There is a whole generation of people now that grew up with them that legitimately like at least some of the prequels more than the original series. Just saying. Different strokes, guys. Carrie, you with me while I go inside here? No, again, it was fine. It was absolutely fine. It probably helped again that I watched it out here, so I was already in a good mindset. And the first few episodes I watched when I was snowed in anyway, so what else was I going to do? But I gave it a chance one way or the other. I'm, again, not going to pretend like it was perfect for me. Some problems are subjective. You can say, well, that just wouldn't be what I would do, or it's not what I like. And some problems are objective. The thing is, I think a lot of people conflate the two. A lot of people think just because it's not how they would do something, or what they like, that means it's truly and arguably wrong. Now, as I said at the beginning, I know they're going for a younger crowd with this. I'm just not sure if they're going to get it. Younger people have other things. In fact, I'm not really sure what organized television younger people watch these days. Are you? They watch a lot of videos and stuff. Shorts and TikToks and Twitwalks and all that. Personally, I kind of like being old. I was always well suited to being an old grumpy person, even though I'm not actually that grumpy compared to some people. I just don't take too much seriously. But again, I guess in retrospect, the fact that one of my biggest criticisms is it's only 10 episodes, which again worked fine for the seasons of Picard. That needed to be 10. But I'm really glad it's returned to being episodic. Strange New Worlds has at least shown us they can do that again. But I think going with episodic, if they'd at least bump it up to 12 or 13, that would be really, really nice. I know we'll never get back to 26 a year. I also really don't like it when they take 2 or 3 years to put out another season. If you're gonna do a season, make it every year, especially if you're only doing 10 episodes. But I'm looking forward to season 2 for what it's worth, and I wouldn't mind if they continued it on. What harm is there? I mean, as I said earlier, we all waste at least an hour a week. And I listen to a lot of shows when I'm packing boxes for work, so sure, why not? I do think it's sad and stupid they canceled Lower Decks. That was a popular show. That was one of the shows that was really getting breakout success, and I don't know why they canceled it. I'm not surprised though. It seems like Hollywood executives make really dumb decisions these days. I'm again ready for the whole system to kind of just go away. The fact that they need so much money just to make a show. I would say some of the best modern sci-fi, well, modern to me. The Battlestar Galactica re-envisioning was excellent. And I really like Stargate. Stargate Atlantis, SG-1. SG-1 started off a little hokey, but it was still fun. I actually liked the original film. I never saw it in the theaters, but I bought a DVD player, one of the first ones, and it came with 5 free movies, and that was one of them. So that's how I got to know it early on. But I really enjoyed it. And I really like Farscape, thinking about SG-1. There'd be one I wouldn't mind seeing again. Farscape. It didn't overstay its welcome, but it really could have used one more season. But it was wacky and zany and funny, but also serious. And I think it worked because they experimented. And I want them to experiment in Star Trek. I don't want them to go, well, we're just going to reenact TNG or DS9. We've been there, done that. We got 7 seasons of each. It was great while it lasted, nearly 200 episodes for each one. But let's try something new. And when you try something new, you're gonna get it right sometimes and not right some other times. It'll be interesting to see if there's any new projects, though. From what it seems like, they're kind of putting the brakes on things, and that might be all right. I really don't know how or why Section 31 ended up. That's one that should have been, of all the stuff that gets talked about in Canada. I mean, what world do we live in that a Captain Sulu film or series didn't get made, but Section 31 did? That doesn't seem right at all. That would have been a neat prequel instead of Enterprise Excelsior in 2001. It still would have been a prequel, but I'm just talking about stuff that I would rather do. It's not always going to be what it is. And I fully admit that I try to look for the good in things. I'd rather be happy after having watched something versus going into it just looking for reasons to get grumpy. Because if I know I'm going to not like it and be unhappy, I just won't watch it. Life's hard enough. Life has enough stress, and what I want to get more in entertainment. And Star Trek has always been a refuge for me. And one reason I've always liked it is what people would consider a woke future. I mean, Star Trek has always been woke, and I mean that in a positive way. It's always been very interracial. It's always been optimistic. It's always been about cooperation, unification. Even though there were seemingly infinite bad admirals in Starfleet, Starfleet itself was always the good guy. And I don't want that to change. Again, they can make missteps. There's fine. That's fine. That's just dramatic storytelling. But I don't want them to be rotten to the core. Because then it just puts the whole thing at risk, in my opinion. Deep Space Nine did a really good job of that. It's also probably why they had Section 31 introduced in that show. That way you could have an element of Starfleet, which was generally bad, but not make all of Starfleet or all of the Federation bad itself. As I've said before, I enjoyed Voyager. It started off pretty serious, but it kind of became popcorn fun. The shuttle thing always cracked me up. At the end of the day, I just had to just not worry about stuff like that in Voyager. Like, oh, how many shuttles have they lost now? How many torpedoes have they shot? Or how come last week the Herodian completely trashed the ship and this week it looks good? Look, if I could overlook that and not even think about it, I can overlook a few faults in Academy. Or for that matter, in Disco. It's just those kind of mounted up over and over and over and whatever. But I didn't hate it. I think my wife liked it more than I did, but I didn't hate it. But I really do find most of the characters in Discovery, in Academy nice. While some of the lingo and some of the jokes annoyed me, the characters didn't. I was afraid they'd be too teen drama-y, and they weren't. Again, I'm not saying every line was pitch perfect, but overall, the characters, even from the first episode, had a sense of camaraderie. And yeah, I liked it. I also liked that they didn't do like the love triangle thing. That was another thing I was worried about. Episode 10 as they try to do that. I don't need that. Yeah. I do hope they do more Star Trek. I do. I don't know. There's been talk about a Captain Archer show. I don't need to explain why I would be about that. For one, whereas Next Generation got 7 seasons and 4 films and all that, Enterprise got 4 seasons, and the 4th one was severely budget cut, even though it was arguably their best season. And no films. So if any show actually does deserve a second shot, or at least something continue, I'd love it. Scott Bakula, while he's in his 70s, is still seemingly pretty spry, and I think most of the rest of the cast is around. So yeah, I would absolutely be up for that. Unfortunately, Deep Space Nine, we've lost so many people in the show now that probably wouldn't be effective, and I feel like that's kind of a complete story. It'd be hard to go back to Deep Space Nine. It really would, because it was so serialized. And Voyager, well, I guess Prodigy kind of was a sequel to Voyager, but didn't they cancel that? I think they did, or whatever. I don't know. I'll be interested to see if they do that new Stargate and if it's any good. Again, that was always a fun show. Yeah, mostly I'm just looking to be entertained, maybe distracted when a day's stressful, and something that can be thought-provoking and also make me feel something. Yeah, and generally speaking, Academy did a better job of that than I thought it would be. Full disclosure, there's been talk about an Academy series, as you know, for 30 some odd years. The concept in general never appealed to me. I never was like, ooh, I want to see Starfleet Academy. That, not the show, but the Academy. That never was just like really popping off in the back of my mind. It's an Academy. Yeah, okay. It was fine to have a few throwback episodes with it, like the first duty and everything, but that was usually enough for me. But with that conceit out of the way, I'm fine with it. And, before you develop a really strong opinion on it, watch it. And if you hate it after that, cool. There's definitely enough in it to hate that might really bug some people. But don't just watch some paid shill angry person who's not even angry. They're just acting. They're just an actor telling you should hate it and go with that. That's silly to me. Everything else is valid. Any opinion you form with firsthand experience, 100% valid. Absolutely as valid as mine. But when you're forming your opinion based on someone else's opinion, and their opinion is probably swayed by money, Because hate sells. It really does. That's something that's been known in the media industry since the media industry began. I'm going to do that. Also, here we are, mid-March, and is there going to be any more Star Trek this year? That sucks. I like watching Star Trek. I do like that episodes now are getting to be more like an hour, which actually reminds me more of TOS. You know, a lot of the early TOS episodes were 48, 49 minutes, and then there were even some longer versions. Yeah, that extra 10, 15 minutes really, to me, gives the episode time to breathe. I really like that. I really do. But anyway, told you I'd do this episode, so it has been done. Now, I've got actually a episode involving some models that I'm looking forward to doing. Hopefully I'll have time this week because I've been busy with my real job and it's left me too tired. But with that, actually got a couple of model videos I want to do before I leave the cabin. I'm about to go in and check it on the cats too. But those are just my opinions and my take. They're worth exactly what you paid for them. Yeah, maybe I am too permissive. Maybe I am too optimistic sometimes. But you know, I've had a hard life, and if I let myself be pessimistic, I don't know if I could have gotten through it. You know? Sometimes you just have to will yourself through and will yourself to see the bright side of things, and it is kind of a fake it till you make it. You do it long enough after several years and it becomes second nature, and then you live. I'm ready for spring. How about you? With that, this is Misha, and on behalf of Peanut and Callie, we'll catch you very soon. Next time.